Okay, so problem 19 of our SAT math prep. This is the no calculator section, so we don't need a calculator for this. A cylinder and a sphere both have the same radius r, where r is greater than 0. Okay, so r is a positive number. The cylinder has a height of 16. The volume of the sphere is half the volume of the cylinder. What is the value of r? Okay, so first of all, we'll write down our unknowns. So we have our radius r, which is greater than 0. We have our h of the cylinder, so we'll call it hc. H sub c has a height of 16. The volume of the sphere is half the volume of the cylinder. So the volume of the sphere, volume sub s for the sphere, v sub s, equals, because it says is, remember anytime we have is, that's going to be equal sign. The hardest part of these word problems is deciphering what they mean, right? And taking their language and making it into an equation. So what we're doing, we're just taking down these variables, taking what's given to us. This r is greater than 0. This height of 16, looking for those numbers, half, right? So then the volume of the sphere is half the volume of the cylinder. So the volume of the sphere is half the volume of the cylinder. So think about that for a second. If I have the volume of like a baseball, and that's half the volume of a cylinder, that means you could either write 1/2 of the sphere equals the volume of the cylinder, or to get rid of some of those pesky fractions, you could just write 2 times the volume of the sphere, or the cylinder, so v sub c. Because 1/2 of something is just saying that the other thing is double that, right? So again, the volume of the sphere is half the volume of the cylinder, so the cylinder is double the volume of the sphere. Those things mean the same thing, so we can write it as the volume of the sphere equals 2 times the volume of the cylinder, okay? The volume of the sphere is half the volume of the cylinder, okay? So then what is the value of r? It wants us to find r. Remember, r is shared between both of them. So no matter what the r is, rc and rs, we don't have any of those. We just have r because rc equals rs equals r, okay? Now remember, there's no multiple choice answers. So now we've had all our information written out. We're looking for a specific answer. So we have to have an equation in order to solve for some of these variables. So remember, the volume of a sphere, Vs, equals 4/3 pi r cubed. Okay, so this you're just going to have to know. And that's why it's important to go over your formulas before taking a big test like the ACT or the SAT. And it's super uber important because other sections like English and reading don't necessarily have to have you memorize formulas, right? That's more of just knowing how to do it and practice. Math is practice too. Practice using those formulas, and then you won't have to study too much right before. So these formulas you should know already, you should be using them. Hopefully you use them in school a whole bunch. So then you can pull this right out of your hat, right? And maybe they give you a formula card, so that would be good too. So then the volume of the cylinder, that's another formula you might have to know. So the volume of the cylinder is just pi r squared times the height. Again, the r is the radius, and that's the distance from the center of the circle to the edge, so like the circumference, actual circle part. And then the height is going to be the height of the cylinder. So anytime we have a cylinder, we have two circles at opposite ends. Those are the bases. Remember, our cylinders look like this. Right? This is like a dotted line. So we have two bases that are circles, and our spheres kind of look like this. Right? Excuse my poor drawing. But we can add some dotted lines here to make it look more circular. There we go. That looks more like a sphere. So the radius from here is going to be from the center of this to the outside. The radius here is going to be the base to the outside, the center of the base to the outside. Okay, so now that we have these formulas, we have some tricky math that we're just going to substitute stuff, right? So the reason that they're telling us that r is positive, we can infer it's because our radius is never negative, right? We can't have the length of something or a measure of something that's negative. So that's why they're telling us r is always positive. So r is some number they want us to find r. So we don't really need this information, do we? Because we know we can't have a negative length, so that's not super important. Okay, now, what do we know? We know HC is 16. So where's HC? Well, this is HC, because this is the volume of the cylinder, and our height is 16. So let's look at that and kind of fill in that equation as we're going. So we have VC equals pi, which we know, r squared, and then h, which is 16. Okay? And then we know that Vs equals 2Vc. Okay? So, if we use what they told us initially, we can just divide by 2 on this side and get 1/2 of Vs equals Vc. Looks like they wanted us to have this equation already. So look, this problem looked pretty unreasonable to deal with at first. But now, we know we can substitute this directly in. Because Vc equals this, we can plug it in. So we have 1/2 Vs equals 16. I'm just moving to the front. Times pi, because these are all multiplied together, right? So we have our commutative property of multiplication. We can multiply things in any order. 2 times 3 equals 3 times 2. So pi times r squared times 16 equals 16 times pi times r squared. All right? And now we just have two variables left. And look, we have another equation that's also in two variables. We have Vs equals 4/3 pi r squared, r cubed. Our two variables that we need to solve for are Vs and r, right? And now we have two equations, we have two variables. We can do another substitution, so let's do that. We can just multiply this whole thing by 2. So 2 times this, and 2 times this. Now Vs is all alone, because 2 times 1/2 cancels to 1, so we have just Vs. That's going to equal 2 times 16, which is 32, right? And because this is all multiplied together, we have the commutative property again, so this is not the distributive property. Be careful there. The distributive property, remember, is when things are added. So if we had like a 16 plus pi plus r squared times 2, then we have to use distributive property, but they're all multiplied together. So we just multiply the entire thing by 2, which is the same thing as multiplying just 16 by 2, okay? That's because we have an invisible multiplication sign between all these, right? And our parentheses are multiplication. So this 2 times this 16 is the same thing as like moving this 16 to the front here, okay? No addition, no distributive property in the middle. So then we have Vs in terms of r squared, which means we have some number here because this is just 32 times pi. We know pi equals 3.14 if you didn't know that. It acts 3.14, 15926, blah, blah, blah. So this is just a number times r squared. It looks scary, but it's just a number. Treat it like a number because it is a number. So, and we know what that number is, even though we don't have a calculator. So we can plug that directly in for Vs, and we can solve. So we have Vs equals 32. Work on this one now. We have 32 pi r squared. We can substitute that in because, you know, Vs directly equals that. That's going to equal 4/3 pi r cubed. So now we can just knock out a huge chunk of this because this looks kind of disgusting, right? But we can just divide by pi r squared because any number divided by itself is 1, right? So to get this alone, we can do pi divided by pi, which is 1, r squared divided by r squared, which is 1, right? So now we just have 32. And then this side, we have to divide by 2 by the same thing, because anything we do one side, we have to do the other. So divided by pi r squared, pi divided by pi is 1. R squared, oh, it's r cubed divided by r squared is just, remember our exponents rule, that's going to equal r cubed minus 2, r to the 3 minus 2, which equals r to the 1, which equals r. Okay, the other thing, the way you can think of that is just doing r squared and r, because r cubed times r, r squared times r to the first power, those just cancel, right? Another way of looking at it, equals r to the first power, which equals r. So r cubed over r squared equals r. So this gets canceled, this becomes just a 1, which is equal to r, and we're left with 4/3 r. So now that's pretty easy compared to what we had before, makes it a lot simpler. Remember, anytime we have something complex, we'll look for things that are similar on the other side and see if we can cancel them out by division or subtraction, right? And we're using specifically division because we have multiplication, right? So we have, right? So we have multiplication, the thing that undoes it is division, so we're using division, right? So then we have 4/3 r. In order to get rid of this fraction, remember we can multiply by 3, right? Okay. We could also divide by 4/3, since we have 4/3 times r, we could divide by 4/3, which is the same as multiplying by 3/4, right? So we're going to multiply by the reciprocal, because that's the same as dividing by it. Remember, anytime we're dividing by a fraction, that's the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So for example, if we have 2 divided by 3/4, that's the same, we'll use some of the numbers. 2 divided by 2/3, that equals 2 times 3/2, multiply by the reciprocal instead of dividing by the fraction. And then we can just multiply straight across. We'll do the same to the other side, so 3/4, the reciprocal, times 32. Our 3 cancels with 3, our 4 cancels with 4, we're left with r. 3 times 32, we have 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 2 is 6, so we have 96. If you want to do it on the side, you do 32 times 3 to get you 2 times 3 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9, same thing. And then we have it over 4. So then you could do this 2 ways. You could think about, I could do long division. So let's do that first. 96. 4 goes into 9 how many times? 2. So 4. That has to go above the 9, doesn't it? Yep. 4 times 2 is 8. 9 minus 8 equals 1, carry the 6. 4 goes into 16 4 times. 4 times 4 is 16. And that cancels to 0. So you have 24. The other way you could think about it is you could do the trick in your head where you go, well, I know 4 goes into 125 times, right? Because that's like quarters. There's 4 quarters in a dollar. 4 25 cents in a dollar. So if that goes in 25 times, I could do subtract 4 from 100 and get 96. So that means 96 is divisible by 4. And it's 1 4 less than the 101. So I'd take 1 away from 25 and get 24. That's another way you can think about it. That's a nice little mental trick for you with those big numbers. So either way, we have 24. We did our long division. We know for sure it's 24 if you don't like the mental trick. So we have 24 equals r. So our value for r equals 24. There's a lot of work there, but don't be scared of it. Write down what you know. Start simplifying the equations. Use substitution. It's the same thing as with x's. Don't stress, just start doing work.